Okay, so we have everybody here. And we're ready to start. This is March 7th, and I will call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order at 6:31 p.m. with minutes being taken by Gail Hunter for our benefit, and we really appreciate that. And this meeting is, I'm not sure if this meeting's being recorded.
It is.
It is. I think it started automatically. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Greg, did you get the message that I forwarded to you about the blue sky timer?
I did not.
If you look in the chat, you should see it.
What is that thing?
Helps you manage meeting times.
Oh,
Okay.
Anyway, we will come back to that at some other time. I just wanted to make sure that it was being recorded. Okay, we have a robust agenda as usual, and I would ask if there's any public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none. The chairman does not have any special report tonight. And let's just jump in. So the first item on our agenda is the public hearing for National Grid. And I'd like a motion to open a hearing to discuss opening the street at 43 feet west of the center line of the intersection of Beach and Union, continuing 15 feet in a south-southwesterly direction to install 2 to 3 inch PVC conduits encased in concrete. For the purposes of the property at 27 Union Street. So I get a motion?
So moved.
And
Second.
second.
Okay, so moved by Ms. Harrison and seconded by Mr. Round. We are now in public hearing. And is there a representative, I think, Savita? Are you here to represent National Grid?
I am
Okay, could you tell us a little bit about your request, please?
Sabita Mahaber Sheehy, representing National Grid, 44 River Street, Beverly, Massachusetts. This is to provide an upgraded service for Callers Restaurant at this location.
Okay. So 43 feet west of the center line, I assume that that's coming down from the intersection of Beach and Union.
It's not touching the one that is in the intersection. It's one more over, but yes, that would be still part of the street.
Okay, and you're planning on doing this when?
We're actually waiting for when the customer is ready to move forward on it. They will be the ones doing the digging.
The customer is doing the digging?
The customer will be doing the digging and meeting our civil group when they break out to meet the customer's conduit.
Is that a typical process?
Yes,
Okay. Do you have any questions from the board?
I do.
Becky?
I have a couple. So with this, I just noticed, not just, but on the work request, where it says underground petition, it says proposed conduit 1 to 3 inches. Where it's showing the key or the legend, but then under the work request itself, it says for proposed 2 to 3 inch conduit. It should be consistent throughout, I think.
My apologies for that, but in the description at the bottom, it does say 2 to 3 conduits encased in concrete.
Correct. Of the 3 notations on this map, 2 of the 3 say 2 to 3 inches and 1 says 1 to 3. But if you're doing a 2 to 3, I think they should all be consistent and say the same thing.
Duly noted, thank you.
Also, that is the only road that semis can get down to the businesses. So I think that that's the time needs to be incredibly sensitive to the other businesses there, as well as not taking place once we're in high summer season.
I'll pass that on to their contractor.
And just to confirm that the road will be replaced to as is or better condition.
Understood.
And I guess lastly, it's just there will be a detail, I'm sure. So that's, and is that's at the customer's cost, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
I have a question, Jeff.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. How many total elapsed days is this project expected to take? I understand you don't know when it's going to start, but how many working days? About?
Typically, they would do the digging. We would get a trench inspection out there to inspect what they have done. They should be plating it in the meantime, and then they can backfill unless they can coordinate with the trench inspector for everyone to be on site at the same time.
And so that's how many working days, kind of?
Possibly 2.
Oh, okay. So that's, if everything fits together, that's fairly quick. And I did note, I guess, in some of the notes that, I don't know, that it might be one-way traffic, it might be two-way traffic. That's at the pleasure of, I guess, the detail or law enforcement. They'll make a decision as to what makes the most sense.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg, any other concerns that you have?
So this will be, again, subject to a permit issued from the DPW as well. And I think Chuck would coordinate timing and review detail plans, traffic detail plans, and wants to make sure that it's not just a patch, but it's curb to curb, because we did just repave this entire area. So there's a desire to make sure that it's not just a patch job.
Is that understood, Sabita?
Yes.
Any other questions of the board? Ann, you have your hand up.
Would it be possible to request that this be done between 5 and 10 p.m. This work?
I can put in the request, yes.
In order to keep the street as available to heavy traffic and without keeping the neighbors up.
Understood.
Thank you.
So there's no scenario that's going to cause the street to be closed off completely. Is that correct?
Not that I foresee, no.
Well, if they're paving the whole thing edge to edge,
But you're requesting it to be done between 5 and 10 PM.
Yeah, edge to edge paving is obviously going to require it to be closed off while they're doing that. The rest of it doesn't necessarily require that.
Well, even then, they would, pave one lane at a time.
right? If this is only done between 5 and 10, is that going to extend the number of days that the disruption will occur?
It could.
Okay. I wonder if we need to balance that. Yeah,
Would you rather have it go later and keep people up, or start earlier and interfere with services to the businesses?
it's going to interfere with the businesses no matter what, isn't it? Because the restaurants are open in the evenings.
It's not, it specifically, it's what Becky referenced, that this is the only road that lets heavy trucks, large trucks that won't go under the Lincoln Street Bridge, in to provide supplies for the hardware store and the grocery store and whoever. That's my concern. It's not, whether eating on the sidewalk is less pleasant or whatever.
Are there specific days where they make those deliveries?
Not to my knowledge. I think it's every day.
So what if we considered a time frame in of 3 to 9? I'm concerned about the street being disrupted for 3 days or 4 days. And
I
we
would
could
have
notify,
to-
we could notify the businesses that that this work would be going on from 3 to 9, and they could ask that their deliveries be done during that time frame.
I suppose.
Any other
Or we
question?
could ask Crosby's when their deliveries actually are, and make that decision, make a further request to National Grid when we know what the answer is.
So again, you might, ask Chuck as part of his street opening permit that he has to issue to finalize these details, to work with the contractor and to put together the best combination here of hours and least disturbance, but getting the job done quickly. I think we understand your intent here, and I think that Chuck could work with, once we know who the contractor is, to work on these details.
Okay. Okay. Any other board comments or questions? Sarah Mellish, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm confused. It seems to me the request is to a handheld at 27 Union, which I think is by the book. But they reference that the request was from Cala's Restaurant. So I don't quite understand how they're getting from 27 Union to Cala's Restaurant.
Because the service for Cala's Restaurant is part of that building.
It's all one building, sir.
Jeff, if I may.
Does that help with your confusion, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Becky,
Was just going to say that it looks from what we were given, that it goes from a manhole 2120 to the handhole 20-1. Is that? So it is from a manhole to a handhole, right? Is that correct, Sabita?
Correct. It's from a manhole to a customer-owned handhole.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and most of that is through the sidewalk, not in the road.
okay. So are we prepared to vote on this?
Would you like a motion?
I would like a motion. We need to, I think we need to close the public hearing first.
Motion to close the public hearing on the National Grid request at 27 Union Street.
Second,
Thank you. Roll call vote. Mr. Round,
yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes to close the hearing. Now, we need a motion to approve the request of National Grid to grab my sheet that has this. To install 2 to 3 inch PVC conduits encased in concrete from manhole 2120 to customer-owned handhole on the property of 27 Union Street.
Friendly amendment
Go ahead.
on plan number 303-15507 of National Grid.
That was where I was going, but that's okay. Thank you.
I jumped in, so moved.
Are we going to include directions regarding the DPW and setting of time and returning the road to its original condition?
Final approval being through the street opening permit with the Department of Public Works, coordinating the time of opening and the time of day that the opening can be, the work can be done. And that'll be up to the Department of Public Works.
second,
Thank you. Roll call vote. Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Board Attorney votes yes. Thank you, Sabita.
Have a good evening.
You too. Next item on our agenda is the Voluminous Open Space and Recreation Plan that will be presented, I believe, by Sue Brown for possible endorsement tonight.
Thanks, Jeff. I hope I don't have to present the voluminous open space and recreation plan.
I hope that you have something that you can present, though.
I gave to Greg a summary of the plan today.
Yes,
Primarily, and so do you have that in front of you?
yes.
Okay, perfect. Then I don't need to read over it or show anything on the screen. For anyone who doesn't know, that this has been going on for a couple of years, and the plan was led by the Open Space and Recreation Committee, and also had a Open Space and Recreation Plan Steering Committee that included members of multiple boards, committees, and as well attended by town staff as well. The plan was given to the Department of Conservation Services, the state level, in June. In November, they gave conditional approval. And now we have a small list of items that, that the consultant has been working on, and now that the town, a few things that we have yet to tie up with the committee. One is a very general, broad vision statement that the state asked us to redo. We had submitted it as a list of the goals, but they wanted a broader statement. The other is some ADA sheets for some of the conservation land. In our last one, we really just had two that we submitted because we didn't submit them if they didn't have any facilities on them. We did the, the ADA plan that we did last year had most of the parks and open space, but the conservation land was not included in that. So we had overlooked that. So we just need to complete a few ADA assessment sheets and pass those in for conservation land. The only other thing that is required is a letter of review and support from the planning board, which has been drafted and approved, and the same from the Board of Selectmen. And then we would be ready to resubmit that to the state, and I would anticipate that we would get approval of the plan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'd like to read the plan before I vote to endorse it. And I have no doubt I could get it done in time for the next meeting, and that it would go very quickly at the next meeting. But neither the material that Greg presented nor what Sue has just said gives me the real feeling for what it includes. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ann. Becky?
Same here. I did try to go onto the town website to look at it, and when I was looking for it, I just found a couple 2021 drafts, so I wasn't sure what it was I was supposed to be reading. But I agree, I would like to read over it as well, and getting the update today while I was at work, unfortunately wasn't really what I'd hoped. So I would like to spend a little time looking at it as well. Thank you.
And Jeff, I have a question, I guess, for
Hold on a
Sue.
second, John. Eli?
Okay. Oh,
Similar comments to Ann and Becky, but I'd like to also add, it would have been nice if in the summary we had some outline of the differentials between the previous plan and the new one, to kind of focus where our attention should be. It's a big document.
John?
Jeff, yeah. I echo what Eli said. That was kind of along the lines of my question. And in particular, I don't know if I saw a grid, and I had a chance to just quickly go through the plan, but yeah, it's very big and you do need a little bit of time to go through it, and I do. I was looking for a grid that would compare or tell me something about what recommendations had been implemented in the past 6 or 7 years versus what needs to still be done. And I realize that there are additional recommendations that are coming out of the current draft, but I'm not sure that I saw, in just glancing through all of this, a list of here are the recommendations and this is what has been implemented in the last several years. And Sue, does that exist somewhere in the plan?
I would have to, I don't think that it specifically exists. I can tell you that much of this plan is verbatim like the last plan. So, you know, all the history and all that is very similar. If you want to condense your review of the plan, you would want to concentrate on the matrix, if you will, of the goal and the recommendations. Most of the recommendations as well were a carryover from the previous plan. I would say that it was beefed up in terms of the focus on resiliency and adding more there. And also, I would say more recommendations about taking an active role on managing our conservation land. So, but otherwise, I think it's very, very similar to the previous plan, but I'm happy to dig in, compare the recommendations from this one to the past one. I know that that was an initial step that they took, is to go through and say, what have we done and what needs to still be done. So I know that they did it, but I don't know if it made it into the text of the plan. So I'm happy to comb through that and kind of tick off some of the things that were done. The most important things that we were able to do is, of course, you know, purchase some more properties.
Yes, okay, well, I appreciate it. And maybe that sits better in a grid of some sort rather than in copy. I did see some updated copy. There were things it referenced that have only happened in the last year or two. So, and you're right, you have to go further in the plan before you get to that. A lot of the upfront stuff is standard.
It is.
Okay.
It is. Oh.
Sure.
No, I meant to mute, not raise my hand. Sorry.
Okay. I'd like to add to the comments that have been made in the limited familiarity that I have with the plan, whether the responsible parties for the implementation of each goal are specified.
They are generally, yes, that is in the matrix.
Okay. All right. Then I think that what we're talking about doing here is having you come back. And when we've had an opportunity to look at this now, what does the board need in terms of time? And what do you need in terms of a time frame?
What do I need in terms of time frame to kind of get the information that the board is looking for?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, gosh. I'll have it.
When do you need the board's approval?
I think it's going to take a couple of weeks for us to get the ADA stuff done. So I think if you meet bi-weekly, I think certainly if you could vote then, it would be helpful. We'd like to get this off our plate. And I could certainly get something within a week to, I think, answer your questions.
Okay. And board members, I am aware of the fact that we have a number of large documents that we're in the process of reviewing. what's a good time frame for the board?
If I may, Jeff,
Sure, Ann.
I'd like to see the complete document, including the ADA part and the overview or introduction, which are not currently done, before I vote on this. So, and I'd just as soon not read it in pieces. So I would suggest pushing it out and not bringing it up again until the document is complete.
When do you think that you can do that, Sue?
That's a little less in my hands. I will, you know, I mean, the ADA pieces are simply, they're really pro forma. Most of it will be blank, and it's just going to say if there are parking spaces or if there are trails and what the width of them generally are. So the ADA piece is not, I don't think that that's going to provide much information to folks, but it is a requirement for that the state is asking for. The general vision statement, if the board is not ready to write it, if they have to write it and approve it at an open meeting, then they're not going to probably meet for another month. But I could certainly create a draft of one that would be likely to be approved. But I can't really tell if we're going to have an approved vision statement from them before their next meeting, which is, you know, the early part of next month.
So what's the time frame that this has to be back to the state? Because is this overdue at this point, or?
Well, it is overdue. We did get we've actually had several extensions. I think the current extension may be the end of the fiscal year. So my hair's not on fire, not getting it done, but it's just another thing nice to have have it completed. So
and when do you think the board will have not the board, but the planning committee, the planning group will have all the pieces put in place as Ann's requesting?
I'm going on the assumption that they'll want to approve the vision statement at their next an open meeting and vote on that. I think it would be a month from now. They just had a meeting, and usually they meet monthly, so I think it would be another month before they could vote on something.
Okay. So I'm gonna make a suggestion that that this come forward to the Board of Selectmen on the 19th of April. I mean, if you're meeting a month from now, as you say, is that going to be before the 19th?
I believe that it will be. They're right now, they're scheduled for the 28th of March, but I think they're going to have to change it because it conflicts with another meeting, a planning board meeting. So typically they would maybe do it the next week. So I think the 19th is a Tuesday, is that?
That's because the 18th is Patriots Day.
I think that makes good sense. Certainly gives us something to shoot for.
Okay, so in terms of our ability to review this, one of the biggest problems that we have as a board is getting documents right before we meet or on the day that we meet, when it's a document of this length. So when could we expect to see it?
Well, I would suggest that the only thing that will change is the vision statement, which will be less than a page long. Everything else is already there. If there's not a full draft, I will make sure that you get the full draft. So everything else is done.
Okay, so if we have access to the full draft without the vision statement, when will we see the vision statement?
As soon as it's approved by the Open Space and Recreation Committee. So my
Which-
guess is that they'll meet the first week of April.
Okay. Okay. Does that work, Ann, for you?
Well, there's the ADA piece, and then there are the matrices that John talked about, or comparisons, what's been done, what hasn't been done, what's new.
I can get that information to you sooner, because that's just work that I will do.
It's a little hard to see that without seeing the rest of the document. To understand that without seeing the rest of the document, at least for me.
Okay, but if we have the rest of the document plus the addendum that you're talking about, it's not an official addendum to the document, but it's for us to be able to digest this.
Mhm.
The only piece that would be missing would be the two pieces, ADA and the vision statement. I assume that you'll be doing the ADA pieces before you meet again with the planning committee.
The planning committee, you mean the Open Space and Recreation Committee?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they could probably be done in very little time. They just need to get done. I mean, I think if you would see them, you would not care if you saw them. They're very,
Okay, so
they're very
so-
simplistic. So I can get those, at most any point. They don't change anything in the plan. They're just an assessment.
all right, so with the exception of the vision statement, do you think that we could have that comparison page, the ADA pieces, and the rest of the document by the 18th?
The 18th of this month?
Yeah,
Sure.
okay, and then we'll take up the whole thing on the 19th.
The 19th of the next month.
Right,
Okay. Yes,
okay,
yes.
does that work for the board? Yes, you're nodding yes.
We can get it all as a package. I don't want to read one piece and then have something else.
Right,
say-
right. What we're talking about is that by the 18th
Right.
of March, Sue will get to us everything except for the vision statement, because that has to be approved in an open public meeting. And that that document will come to us afterwards, but will come well prior to the 19th of April, when we'll review and vote on this. Okay,
Yes,
all right. So that's pretty much all we need to do on this tonight. Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
Our next agenda item isn't supposed to start until 7:15, so I'm going to slip down to administrative matters. Not scheduling a special town meeting because we need Ellen Wilson here for that. But I do want to slip down to section B of administrative matters, which is the MBTA Communities and Transit-Oriented Development Public Forum. Originally, we were scheduled to have that public forum tonight, but I asked Greg, at the request of several board members, to separate that out as a separate public hearing, as a dedicated public hearing at a single meeting. So what we need to do tonight is to grab a schedule from everybody that works and it's not in conflict, not conflicting with other major business of the town. Um, So we typically have done this either, well, I don't want to, we've typically done this on a Thursday. Greg, FinCom's meeting on Thursday, the 17th and the 24th.
So I'm hoping that, and I'm sure Sarah would like to be finished by then. But they may need the 24th to finish. So
Well, I know
Yeah.
that they're having a separate meeting for dispatch and public health position after they review the whole.
right. I think we're
Sarah's
talking-
here, we could probably ask her.
Yes. She's got
Sarah.
it.
Yes, I think there's 3 items on the agenda. One is dispatch, one is public health, and what's the other one? So we're trying to close out the budget on the 23rd with operating, capital, and schools.
That's a Wednesday.
No, 24th, sorry.
Yep.
Okay. So that's
And-
closing out.
We're not,
operating-
yeah, we're not sure whether we're meeting on the 17th yet.
And when were you going to do the dispatch, public health, et cetera?
24th,
On the 24th?
yes.
And you're going to close out everything else on the 17th?
No,
On the 10th.
10th.
On the 10th.
We're
That
hoping,
leaves the 17th open?
right, it's St. Patty's Day and there's members who don't want to meet. Just,
Is there a problem with our doing a public forum on the 17th, or should we try and do it on the 15th?
If I may, could we do it on the 31st? And just avoid any possible conflict with the finance committee?
Greg, when do we need to get this done?
Mace?
But you have until May 2nd. In terms
but
of,
Greg, when do we need the FinCom report completed?
right, so that's, I think you'll need to wrap that up. I think you'll need the 31st to wrap that up,
Oh, boy.
unless you can do it the 24th, but I suspect you'll need the 31st as a wrap-up meeting. If you're not meeting the 17th, I think you'll need the 31st as a wrap-up meeting.
And when does the report need to be completed?
The following week, the week of the 4th.
The week of the 4th or the 4th?
Well, the 5th.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
okay. When, Greg, do you need us to do this public forum?
So the absolute latest, it needs to be completed before the 2nd of May.
It has to be completed by then.
Yes. So there's a form that we need to submit to the state that we've held this public forum, and that form needs to be submitted by May 2nd.
Is there any other action that we need to take on it?
No, you need to hold the forum. That's really what the form is all about, that you've discussed it, that you've had a public forum on the issues and the process and what it's calling for. Now, the disadvantage of waiting until after the 31st is the deadline for getting any comments to the state on their draft guidelines.
Got it.
So if you wanted to do, well, we should double check when the Conservation Commission is meeting. We could try for a Tuesday. Let me see if I can find that quickly. I think the Concom is meeting tomorrow night, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just see if I can find that quickly.
March 8th.
Yeah, they're meeting tomorrow, so they meet every 3 weeks.
Okay, so
1, 2, 3. So 15th or the 22nd. If you wanted to get in before the close of the comment on the draft guidelines.
okay, how does that work for board members? The 15th or the 22nd?
So the 15th would be
Sue's shaking her head and she's going to be doing presentation on this.
Okay.
You have to unmute yourself, Sue, for us to hear you.
Apologies. The 15th is the Affordable Housing Trust is meeting that evening.
What about the 22nd?
That looks clear on my calendar.
Board members? 22nd?
Yeah.
That means having 2 meetings one night after the other.
Yep.
But I think it's important that we do this as a dedicated meeting.
I also think it's important that we get it publicized.
Absolutely.
The 22nd has advantages in that over the 15th.
Okay. All right, so mark your calendars. We're going to do the public forum on the evening of March 22nd, which is World Water Day,
At what
for
time?
those of you who are keeping track.
Would we do
What-
that at 6:30, Jeff?
We would do that at 6:30, unless you want to meet earlier.
Nope.
Or later.
Okay. All right, let's go back to our previously scheduled agenda to the FY23 budget discussion on personnel requests from Public Safety and Board of Health, and the issue of Planning Board legal services. So members of the board, have you been following the issues of the related to the personnel requests from the police department, the fire department, and the health department? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
In their last meeting, the Finance Committee they haven't finalized any of these, but they had leaned towards approving a position request for the police department to backfill for an officer who has been out on long-term leave. Under 111A. They approved, I don't think it's the final approval, but they tentatively approved an extra floater position for the fire department. And we're not inclined to approve the requests related to a safer grant to expand the department staff by 3 or 4 positions to have 4 firefighters on each shift. And in terms of the health department, there was a lot of discussion about the request for the health administrator and
Agent,
go ahead.
yeah, health agent, not
Excuse
administrator.
me, health agent. We have a health administrator now. Health agent, who would be a department head. And some requests to have the health agent position presented as an up or down request for a particular configuration in their budget, an up or down request for a single budget rather than alternative budgets that were presented in a meeting in February. At this point, in a conversation that I had with Sarah about this, the health agent position and the health agent budget is going to be taken from the main budget and heard separately along with dispatch in a separate meeting. Both to have the health department, excuse me, the Board of Health get their requests more streamlined and clearer, and to be able to discuss the alternatives without dealing with it in the context of the larger budget. So that's been pulled out for that reason and will then be reinserted after that separate hearing. The police request is what it is. And there's an inclination on the FinCom to fill that position. And the outstanding issue then is the fire department. And I think that you all have been made aware of the SAFER grant that Chief Cleary has submitted, and the indications that Chief Cleary had to date was that the SAFER grant looked like it might be a go. The board, the FinCom was not willing to entertain an increase in positions, even if the SAFER grant were okayed. Because the SAFER grant lasts for a period of, I believe, 4 years,
3 years,
3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Thank you. 3 years, and after which the town would have to assume all salary and benefits costs for those firefighters. So that's where we stand right now. Chief Cleary is here. Chief Fitzgerald is here. I don't see anyone from. I don't see anyone from the Board of Health. So are there any questions of either of our chiefs on these positions? We're not making a vote tonight, one way or the other, but we're trying to clarify the issues from the Board of Selectmen's point of view.
I'm sorry, Jeff, could you clarify what you mean by clarify?
No.
Okay.
The issue from my point of view is, do you need more information from either of the two chiefs tonight?
I do not.
Nor do I, thank you.
Nor I, this has been presented a couple of times to us. And I don't think it's changed structurally in the intervening time.
John?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of information. I just maybe have a couple of questions for Chief Cleary. And I think we saw the numbers in one of the reports. I know that, I guess, I don't know, there are 4 or 5 fires that occur each year that we call on, but there are many more EMS calls. And I think you say it's about once a week, you've got 2 calls that come in simultaneously and you have to kind of juggle that. And
Correct.
I'm assuming those are EMS calls. And do you know of all
They're
of the
not all
calls that-
EMS calls.
Pardon me?
They're not all EMS calls.
They are not all, but I assume
No.
the vast majority are.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Statistically, yes.
Yes, I guess that's what I'm asking. I mean, as I consider this, you know, it's a matter of risk management here. That's what we're kind of dealing with. And, you know, the chance of a fire for any of us is pretty low. But the town is getting older and the chance of winding up with an EMS call, frankly, is pretty high at some point in your life. And I'm just kind of, how many EMS calls relative to fire is that?
Well, we do over 600 EMS calls a year,
Okay,
and we had 68 simultaneous calls for service last year, which could have been 2 fire calls, a fire call and an EMS call, or 2 EMS calls.
right. But if the odds are what they are, then the chances are it's 2 EMS more than anything else.
Right,
I
which
would
which
suspect.
means 1 EMS call is being handled by 2 firefighters in the ambulance with being able to transport to the hospital and be able to bill the patient. The second means a single individual from the department goes and renders care and waits for an out-of-town mutual aid ambulance. And then
Right.
that ambulance transports the patient however long it takes them to get here, and that they get the billing for that patient.
Okay, so we really have 1 ambulance in town, equipment wise, 1 ambulance.
Well, we
that's
have
capable.
2. We have a spare. It is not currently running
Right,
because we
Okay.
haven't been getting staff back enough to justify fixing it to run a second ambulance. If we were to get the staffing up to 4, then my intent would be either to fix that ambulance or get another one so that we had a second ambulance able to transport should we get a second call.
okay, good. Thank you for refreshing my
You're welcome.
cloudy memory.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Greg,
So,
did you want to add to this?
well, I think it would be helpful if we had an indication of which way the board is leaning on these 3 items.
So would you like
What?
us?
Why don't we
Develop-
start, why don't we start with the request from the police department for a position for filling a vacancy from long-term leave. Are we in support of that? Do you need more information?
I would be in support of that.
I'm in support of that, Jeff, also.
Yes.
Likewise.
My only question about that is if that officer were to, when that officer leaves the department, if he doesn't return to work, and what happens to that position? Because then the position that exists would be there, plus this position that's being requested this year.
If I may, Jeff?
So,
Go ahead, Greg.
well, the Chief Fitzgerald can jump in as well, but I think what he sees is going forward, it's a bit of a wait and see issue in terms of the impact of police reform on our reserves. So if we lose a small number of reserves, then we would be okay with just the one backfill. But if we lose many more reserves, then he would be requesting a second hire. I mean, this is really a replacement of an injured officer, so it's not adding to the force. So it's a net. Once the officer is off our books, there's no net gain, but it does help us with the loss of reserves. And if the loss of reserves is high enough, then the chief would be requesting to increase the total roster by hiring one more full-time officer. Do I have that right, Chief?
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of in a wait and see period to see how the Bridge Academy shakes out and whether or not these officers, the reserve officers, will meet the minimum requirement of 2,400 hours by January 1st of 2027. And if they don't, then that means we have to send them to a full-time academy, which is not very cost effective for a part-time employee.
If I may.
Let me just follow up before you say something there. There's the officer who's on leave now there's money attached to that position. He's being paid.
Correct.
Is he being paid out of town funds?
Yes.
That's my question. What happens to that money?
So if we do not hire beyond, then that money is returned to the general fund. If we need to hire and go to one additional police officer on the roster, then those dollars being paid to the injured officer, it's like 2/3 of salary.
Right.
It's not. So we'd have to add another third to hire that additional officer.
But that need
So-
won't be known for another 5 or 6 years.
Right, it could be that long.
Could be, or it could be sooner. It all depends on what, as we get closer to 2027, how it would look.
Okay. Becky, you had a comment?
I actually wanted just to clarify something with Chief Fitzgerald. Pertaining to the reserve officers you have right now, the part-time. If you were to send them to the academy, how long is the academy and how much is it, out of curiosity?
It's 26 weeks, and it would cost an average of $40,000, and that's academy tuition along with their pay while they're in the academy.
Okay, so 26 weeks. Right, thank you very much.
Sarah, you had a comment?
Yeah, so the Finance Committee considered this. And we certainly have a concern regarding the longevity of the reserve officers, and whether they can provide the services we need. And it made sense to us that we backfill this 11F position, which I believe has been 4 or 5 years, and maybe another 3 years, and kind of ease into the staffing requirements when our reserve officers are no longer available because they're academy trained and gonna go out and find full-time jobs.
Okay. We're coming up against a deadline here, and this is a longer discussion. And do you have a comment about the police position, or you want to comment about one of the other positions?
I had a question about something that Chief Fitzgerald said. And I don't remember exactly the words. He said how something or other works out. A fill-in academy or is there some possibility of a partial academy to complete the qualification of police officers?
Yeah, so over the next 3 years, officers, beginning this year, officers with the last names that end in A through H must attend a Bridge Academy. Then it was I through P next year and Q through Z the following year. So they have to attend this Bridge Academy, which consists of firearms, 40 hours of firearms training, 40 hours of defensive tactics, 40 hours of emergency vehicle operators course, and then 80 hours of classroom training. Either way, they have to complete this training to bring them up to the level of hours of a full-time officer. But by January 1st of 2027, they have to have, along with this, 2,400 hours of police service. Now, dispatch duties and road details don't count, so they have to be actually out on patrol. If they don't have those 2,400 hours by January 1st of 2027, even though they've attended this Bridge Academy, they have to go to a full-time academy. The town would be required to send them to a full-time academy if you want to keep them on a part-time basis. So basically, the reserve academies come, I think it was July 1st of last year, are no longer functioning. The state did away with them, and if we were to hire a reserve officer, they would already have to have the academy, and they would have to attend the Bridge Academy. But again, that once they finish that 2,400 hours and attend the Bridge Academy, that makes them a full-time trained officer, which makes them more attractive to other departments. So over the course of time, these officers are going to phase out.
Forgive me, I didn't write down those numbers as you rattled them off. I'm slow on transcription. The Bridge Academy is some number of.
So it's 40 hours of defensive tactics, 40 hours of firearms, 40 hours of emergency vehicle operators training, and then 80 hours of classroom training.
Okay, thank you.
And with those number of hours, it brings them to the level of a full-time officer with the equivalent number of hours.
Thank you
That's
very
five.
much.
That's 5 weeks, right, Tom?
Yeah, pretty much. That's the difference, I guess, what they figured out with the MPTC and POST, which is the Post Commission, the new police officer standards of training that was developed under police reform. That's the the equivalent or the difference between the full-time officers training and the reserve officer academy.
Okay. So in general, the board is in support of this position to fill for the officer who has been out on leave, on medical leave. All right. I'm aware of the time, and I'm concerned about moving on to the next two positions or next two departments. We have Chief Cleary here, so I'd like to Chief Cleary, you wanted to say something?
Yes, if you would indulge me just a second to kind of give a history of what we were looking for overall. I originally put $120,000 in my proposed budget as a placeholder for either a firefighter if the SAFER grant didn't come through, or the potential of getting a deputy chief. That money was taken out of the budget, and when I spoke to the budget committee, the finance committee chair, she mentioned to me that I had presented too many options last year and that I should narrow it down to the best option of what we required that was most fiscally responsible. At that point, I put in for the 4 SAFER positions and presented that as the ideal to get us up to the staffing so that we meet the federal OSHA regulation of 2 in and 2 out. When those options were not discussed, and if you remember in the previous Board of Selectmen, there was talk of it being a warrant article, which you didn't want, you wanted it part of the budget. I was looking to get a position as a placeholder in the event that the SAFER grant did not come through. And that's where the current extra position that's been proposed came from. However, the proposal was an extra position as a placeholder if the SAFER didn't come through, but then a subsequent hire of an additional firefighter for the next 2 years, so that over the course of 3 years, there would be 3 hires, and in 4 years, I would be up to the same 4-on shift as I would be if you accepted the SAFER grant. The current extra position as a floater does nothing to increase any of my shifts to 4 and merely pays for itself by cutting $100,000 out of my overtime budget. So it takes overtime away from the guys that want it. It gives me a second floater to cover vacations and vacancies, but all 4 shifts remain staffed at 3, which doesn't help me to meet 2 in, 2 out, the OSHA regulation, and doesn't allow me to run a second ambulance or 2 people on a fire apparatus for a second call for simultaneous calls.
Becky?
Hi, Chief.
Yes.
When OSHA stipulates that it's 2 on, 2 off, what is that? How is that number arrived at? I mean,
That's
is
the
it-
standard, because if you have 2 people operating in the building, you need 2 people outside that are committed to be their rescue team should something go wrong.
so regardless of the size of a community, it's
Yes,
2 on, 2 off.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Sorry, I'm just making notes.
Any other questions for the chief? So the question is whether the Board of Selectmen would be supportive of moving forward with the plan for the SAFER grant. That's really the question here.
Yeah.
in their meeting on I believe it was the 24th or the 25th of February, the Finance Committee said that they would not support the town accepting the SAFER grant. If it were to be awarded to the town.
Right, they had concerns about that year 4 fiscal impact.
So do members of the board want to express an opinion about whether they would support the town accepting the SAFER grant?
Yeah, Jeff, I've got some thoughts.
Go ahead.
I'm in favor of the SAFER grant with 3 firefighters. For the comments that I made a little bit earlier, mostly regarding EMS, but I'm also curious as to how all of this situation with the dispatch is going to come down. And we don't know that. I just can't tell how the winds are blowing for all of that. But I would be in favor of the SAFER grant if we wind up with money coming out of dispatch because we go to regionalization, and that can soften the landing associated with that year 4 and beyond. So I don't know if we can tie those two together. It really doesn't affect our budget this year, I don't think.
Except the SAFER grant will come or not come this year.
Yes, and we would accept or decline depending upon what happens with dispatch.
What's the time frame for accepting the SAFER grant?
I would have to double check on what the actual acceptance period is. I don't have the information right in front of me. Let me see if I can find it for you.
If I thought you submitted, I'm sorry, Jeff, may I?
Sure, go ahead.
I thought I remembered you saying that the SAFER grant, you submitted it for 3 to 4 firefighters, right?
I submitted it for 4.
4, okay. Can you then lower that number, or does it have to be for the 4?
The only way I can lower it is whatever number I take has to equate to 4 people on each shift. So
Okay,
I could
thought
not
that's what-
accept any less than 3.
Okay, thank you.
And I would have to negotiate with them for those 3 since it was submitted for 4.
Mhm.
And I would have to make a case before them why I did not want the extra firefighter that I put in for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you remind me of the commitment past year 3 from the SAFER grant? SAFER grant pays for them for
SAFER
3
grant
years.
covers 100% salary and benefits for 3 years for each of the firefighters.
In order
In
to get
year
the
4, you assume that 100% as part of the operating budget.
And in order to get the grant, does the grant place any stipulations on the town for past 3 years?
No, it does not.
All right, so I think my position on this is the worst possible case is that we don't find it financially feasible in year 4 to maintain those additional firefighters, and we reduce staff. In the intervening 3 years, we will have had the benefit of additional firefighters. So if I do pure calculation, I think that it seems reasonable to take the grant.
Ann?
I agree with Eli. I think the finance committee can provide additional funding year by year to make it so that there's a slope instead of a cliff. And I think that it's certainly a better choice than adding one person a year and getting no benefits whatsoever, except the advantage of having the people there, but no financial support. So I think we should take the grant.
Becky?
If at the end of the SAFER grant, Chief, if we don't have the money to support the firefighters, do we then have to repay the SAFER grant?
No, you do not.
Okay, so there's no risk to
What?
the town.
No, my only caution would be that when people get hired to become full-time firefighters, they are looking at a career in the fire service. If it was unlikely or it was questionable whether or not those positions would be funded after the 3 years, you could see people leave by attrition because once they got here, they would have one eye open for a more stable department to go to, which could make the fact that firefighters and firefighter paramedics are difficult to find could honestly affect the hiring if they thought their career had a shelf life of 3 years.
Right, I understand that. I just,
So, I
I
just wanted to point that out, thinking how I would view it if I was being hired for a position stable for 3 years, but you're thinking a 20-year career. So,
right, of course. I'm just saying that.
sure,
that,
there's
you
no,
know,
we
we
don't,
ask we
right,
ask for recommendations from our FinCom, and they're the
Sure.
ones who are the experts.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Regardless,
also within, just as an aside, within 5 years, there's likely going to be 3 retirements. Forced due to age and the time people have put in service.
so just to, I understand what you're saying. It should be clear that there is no way that this board can promise a commitment out past 3 years. We're incapable of doing it.
Understood.
Sarah, I would ask that any comments that you have to make, don't open this up as a FinCom meeting. But if you'd like to make a comment, go ahead.
Right. So I think that the challenge we have is the fire chief is looking for a 2 in, 2 out. We also have a 40B property application before us. And there's only one egress in. And the challenge is, how do you remove cars and trees that are in the way? And the fact of the matter is, whenever we have had real fires, we've called in mutual aid, and we've had 4 people, 2 on 2, responding. And so we feel that it's unreasonable to bear the extra cost of having 2 in, 4 out for 1 or 2 fires a year. Thank you.
We're talking though 86 incidents of the demand for a mix of fire services and emergency services.
We're not talking about emergency services. We're talking about the fire code requiring 2 in, 2 out. That's separate from ALS services.
The 2 in, 2 out is a federal OSHA regulation. It's not a fire code, it's a federal regulation.
For
And if we
fire.
get the 4, it allows us to run a second ambulance and a simultaneous medical aid call, regardless of the fact that it gives us 2 in, 2 out for fire calls.
But the 2 in, 2 out is a fire code issue, not an ALS issue.
Okay. I don't want to go back and forth on that particular piece of this. What we do know is that there are 85 or 86 incidents where there's a demand for 4 firefighters in the building, and we're not providing that service now. The question is whether that's enough of a demand to put the town in the financial position of funding a total of 4 firefighters. Either 3 on the grant plus the extra position that was suggested for this year or not. Any other comments from the board? Okay. I would like to not take up, I'm not sure what to do about that. The next meeting of the Board of Selectmen is on the 21st. Sarah, you said that you were meeting on the 24th with Board of Health? You have to unmute. Thank you.
Correct. Our next meeting, we're expecting to meet with the Board of Health and Dispatch on the 24th.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to take up our discussion of the Board of Health health agent position at our next meeting. Is there any issue with that from the Board of Selectmen? Okay. There's a separate issue on the budget, which is the planning board has raised a question. Now, we're going to be talking a little bit later on about access to town council as a policy of the Board of Selectmen and modifying the existing process. Separate from that, the planning board has made a request to have a separate budget for legal services for that board. Now, I've talked some with Sarah about this in terms of how legal services are budgeted by the town. And there's one budget for legal services. What the planning board needs is both ready access, which we'll talk about under policies tonight, and that they would like to have an amount of money set aside for planning board legal services in the budget. And the question is, do we support them? Not the access issue. We can talk about that in a little bit. Now, we can talk about this now. We're behind. And Alan has been here for 20 minutes, more than 20 minutes, waiting for us to start up on the articles discussion. We can roll this over to the 21st, or we can talk about it now. Actually, we should talk about it now because they're going to vote on this on the 10th.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think you should change your order of agenda for my convenience, so I'll just wait patiently.
Thank you as always.
Of course.
Ann.
What is the current process? I'm not talking policy, but what is the current process for getting legal services to the planning board when they require it?
So they would put a request into me. And then I usually talk to town council about the need for additional support, and assuming that it's we feel it's warranted, then I approve that going forward.
Not for the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah, it's same process.
I'm sorry, Bill, I didn't understand what you said.
I was essentially asking the same question, but for the zoning board of appeals. And Greg said basically the same process.
Which is not the Board of Selectmen's policy, which is a separate matter. We'll deal with that tonight. Becky,
And how long does that process typically take? Greg,
I don't want to talk about the process.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, access. I want to follow up with what was asked in terms of getting access. If they're asking for their own access to legal services without going through Greg, that's what I'm trying
They're
to
not
get
asking
in.
for that. And at least that's my understanding, Greg. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
I thought that there were two things that they were asking for. One is to have a portion of legal services budget allocated so that they have access to that portion of the budget.
right, direct and go directly to town council without having to go through my office.
Which is what I'm asking is why
Okay,
is the
I'm
time
sorry, that wasn't my understanding, but all right, go ahead, Becky, with your question. How long does the process take if they go through you, Greg?
So, yeah, normally it's like a week's turnaround time. Some of that depends on, town council's ability to get back in touch. But I would say normally it's within a week.
And they often have time constraints, correct? Based on when something is been received by town clerk and when they have isn't that correct? The time they've got to tick certain boxes within a specified time frame.
Certainly if it's related to an application, yes. And normally that's highlighted. If there's if the clock is ticking, then I certainly let council know that.
Mhm. Thank you.
Eli?
Yeah, pretty regularly, the town's auditors go through and review our processes, our budget line items, our accounting methods, et cetera. And they write recommendation letters for changes. Have the accountants ever written any recommendation letters suggesting or recommending that we break the budgeting of legal services out so that there are separate accounts for the planning board and or the zoning board of appeals?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe they have. They would leave that sort of as a local preference in terms of how you track your expenditures. You track them and associate the actual cost to the different departments, or is it lumped together? There's a perennial discussion about health benefits. There are communities that will budget those by department, and there are communities that budget it as one whole, a single account. From a accounting administrative perspective, it's a lot easier to do the single account. From a true cost accounting perspective, it's more revealing to have it by department.
Okay, John?
Yeah, so question for Greg, but right now these requests go through you. Have you ever declined a request and that you can remember? Or well, maybe I'm being too assumptive on that. How often do you decline a request?
So sometimes I've been able to answer it without involving town council, just with my experience and having dealt with the question before. So there are times that has happened. But if I don't know the answer, I can't recall a time that I've declined a request.
Okay, well, that's an important observation. I mean, it seems to me we want to kind of streamline this as much as possible, but I'm not sure money has to sit in two different places, but bypassing you may cost us money.
I'm concerned that this is a discussion that we were going to have under reviewing BOS policies tonight. This aspect of it. This is the budget discussion, and whether the question is whether we create cost centers for specific boards to have access to a certain amount of money, or we create cost centers for within the legal services budget. Right now, Greg, my understanding is the legal services budget is a net figure that we work off of, and when we reach a point where the legal services budget is exhausted and we still need legal services, then we have to present to the Board of Selectmen for reserves
Right, Selectmen and FinCom, yes.
and FinCom. So the question, I'd like to keep to the narrow question in this discussion and come back to the policy of how town council is accessed when we do our BOS policies discussion. Becky. Becky, you have your hand up? You have your hand
Yeah.
down?
No, yes. I do have a question. And Greg, so for planning board legal services, isn't there already under the town planner legal services category? Is
There's a
this
professional,
independent?
there's a professional services line.
And there's not legal.
So, I mean, legal would fall under professional services. So if you wanted to add additional dollars to those, to that professional services line, it could be used for legal and other consultants.
So I guess, how does this differ?
Is what different?
How does asking for legal services funding differ from that budget item that the monies they already have budgeted?
That's for consultants.
So the money they have budgeted is to help with a project, typically an expert in a field, a zoning field or landscape architect. I mean, so different, maybe some mapping services.
Okay, they used to have legal services budget before the town hired a town planner. So what happened?
I think what we did was we called it professional services as a broader category.
And that's what I'm trying to clarify, is that if we already have that broader category under which legal services falls, is this another legal services in addition to what's under that?
Well, there's two ways you can go. You can either add more money to the professional services line and say it's for both, or you create a separate specific legal services line. You can do either one.
Okay, thank you.
Or obviously you can keep it under the general category that we currently have.
Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes, Eli.
at this point, I think the two issues are too conflated and virtually impossible for us to tease apart. I would prefer to get into the policy discussion and then revisit this if we need to.
Okay. Sarah?
Yes, as chair of the ZBA, I have had no issues accessing town council. If the planning board wants to have a separate $10,000 budget in this fiscal year, I believe it would require a finance committee reserve transfer. And I'm not sure we would be in favor of that.
When you say in this fiscal year, you're saying before June 30th.
My understanding, they're looking for money now, not next fiscal year.
That's not my understanding, but
Well, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think there was some interest in some dollars now.
perhaps the chair of the planning board could comment on this. He's got his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The issue, I don't think you can keep them separate. I think the issue has been, we're under a lot of stress or to get things out for this recodification effort. So what's come up is the policy that, as I know it, is we have a form that we send to the Board of Selectmen requesting legal services. And then from my understanding, it's you decide whether it's valid and whether to spend the money going forward. So we were looking to circumvent that policy and be able to, for timeliness, go to the town council directly. So with that, we wanted, a pot of money to do that. So I think that's kind of where we're coming from.
Okay. And that's within this current fiscal year.
Correct. The issues with the planning board are now, so.
Okay. So I'm gonna stop this discussion here. And wait until we get to our policy discussion. Because what Greg described is not the policy of the Board of Selectmen as it exists today. So we've had a practice that's different than an existing policy. And we need to get that clarified first. And then how access works, whether access can be done by a particular board directly, or whether the access has to go through town administrator, that's a policy question that we need to discuss under our policy, the policy part of our agenda. It's not a fiscal question. I misunderstood the planning board's request as a fiscal request for next year's budget, FY23. And any legal services that are necessary between now and the special town meeting, when the planning board will be doing the bulk of its presentation of the bylaw review, would necessarily be taken from our existing legal services budget for this year. If that's exhausted, then we would have to go through the process of dealing with FinCom and the Board of Selectmen about approving a reserve transfer. Let's stop it there and move on in our agenda to article discussion for town meeting. Okay. And Mr. Wilson is with us. Greg, you want to cue this up?
Sure, thank you. So there are a handful of additional articles beyond the sort of standard budgetary articles that we anticipate having at the annual town meeting, now set for April 25th. And so included in that list of additional articles, the potential for a couple of articles related to fire code, basically local option law that would allow sprinklers, require sprinklers in certain buildings that are under various uses, primarily boarding house or multifamily lodging and multifamily units. One is a look back for existing, and the other is only for new construction going forward. And the fire chief can elaborate on both of those. Secondly, we've talked about in the past, passing the local option law that would allow imposing a room tax on short-term rentals, something that the state now allows. It's been on the books for a couple of years now, 3 years. And another article that you have talked about briefly is officially changing the name from selectmen to select board. And then there is the amendment proposed for the LCD, the limited commercial district, which would facilitate a potential project from cell signaling company, cell signaling technologies, CST, to move forward with a permitting process, potentially to allow them to build a new research campus near the MAC. So I think those are the articles that are on the table, and how you want to deal with them.
Alan, you're going to need to unmute.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. I assume that in addition to the normal budget articles, town, school, CPC, we'd also have the usual articles for accepting the reports in the annual report of the town and all the other normal things that we have at the annual town meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, that was my assumption, Alan, yes.
Okay. When we talked last, a couple weeks ago, I had said I probably wouldn't propose a consent calendar, but when I looked at the usual business of the ATM, I think it would make sense for me to offer a consent calendar and hope we can get 6 or 7 articles done all in one vote. So that's a change from my last plan.
And included in the consent calendar would be the acceptance of reports.
Well, I don't have the list. I don't have the list in front of me. Acceptance of reports, setting all of our salaries at 0, the revolving fund for the Parks and Recreation Department. And there are 2 or 3 others that I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. So do we need to finalize the articles tonight?
No, I'm just looking for what I should be drafting in putting together a draft warrant. So I'm happy to advance all of these, but if you're not interested in 1 or 2, then I won't spend the time on it.
And
I think we have been asked by the planning board to put on the warrant a reorganization, making them an appointed board of 5 rather than an elected board of 7. And I think I remember that the Board of Health has asked to go Board of Health to be elected rather than appointed. What do we want to do about those?
I can't speak for the planning board reorganization. I believe that the Board of Health may have an alternative solution that is less drastic than changing them from appointed to elected. So that may not be necessary. I would like to say that I think, given the fact, we all hope the current trend in the COVID numbers continues to be positive. But I would like to suggest that since this is going to be an indoor meeting at the end of April, and we really don't know what is going to happen between now and then, that we keep this agenda as short as possible. And move anything that's not time sensitive or essential to the special town meeting that will follow in June.
Eli, you had your hand up?
I did, and then I lowered it, and I'm going to collect my thoughts for a moment, and then I'll be back.
Okay. Any of the articles that Greg described that board members would rather see not placed on this agenda, on this warrant?
Yep,
Which one?
I think that changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board is not time critical.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Becky,
If I may,
I'm sorry.
if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
I don't think it's time critical, but I also think it is not going to take much time at all. And I think that the other meeting is going to be a very long one.
I think you're right about that, Becky, for sure. But we're going to talk about the scheduling for that and the timing of it later, but I think the advantage of the June time slot is that if the COVID numbers turn around again and we get another surge, we can choose to hold that meeting outdoors where people will be safer. And that's my reasoning for thinking that we should keep the April meeting in, which we know will be indoors, as short as possible.
Eli?
Yeah, would it be, Alan, since you're going to do a consent calendar, would it be reasonable to place renaming of the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board within a consent calendar?
Sure. I mean, I don't have any sense of whether it's controversial or not. I hope it's not, but I don't know. I could certainly put it in, and the voters would have the option of removing it.
Yeah,
And
I don't think it's controversial.
I disagree. I don't like it. I will vote against it. I may campaign against it.
Well, that suggests that the consent calendar requires a unanimous vote to approve it. And I think we've just heard that including the change of name would not get a unanimous vote.
the idea of doing this change is something that I've proposed previously and tried to get onto the warrant previously. It's not a matter of political correctness. It's a matter of adjusting to the changes that have occurred all across the state of Massachusetts. Currently, I think it's about 70% of all select groups in various towns are called select boards and select board members. My understanding is that the Massachusetts Association of Selectmen, our professional association, has changed its name as well. It's an archaic form, and while there might be arguments about political correctness that are brought to bear on this, I don't think it's that controversial.
Well, I'm not saying it's controversial.
I'm not suggesting that it go into the consent agenda either.
Okay, because I think, having heard from Anne, it would be more or less fruitless for me to put it in the consent calendar.
Right. I agree. And I'm willing to do a write-up about why this change is being requested, so that it's not positioned in its proposal to be a matter of political correctness. I cannot predict what will happen in a town meeting as to whether people will see it as politically correct.
I just want to return to my previous point and say that I think from a public health and safety perspective, the shorter we can keep the warrant for this indoor meeting in April, the better. I'll leave it at that.
Any other articles that people would have a question about including in the warrant as Greg read through them?
Yes, Jeff, I have a question or comment. I'm not sure that the sprinkler requirement issue has been vetted enough that we know that that discussion would be a short one. I think there'd be a lot of questions about what it applies to and what it does not apply to, even with the written documentation.
Okay. Other board members on the sprinkler article?
I do have one.
Go ahead, Becky.
Actually, never mind.
Okay.
Change my mind.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just weigh in to agree with John, I think the sprinkler proposal hasn't been well publicized. I suspect that it will get a lot of discussion, and therefore I think I would agree that it might better be postponed to June.
Board members?
I haven't got strong feelings on it.
I think there will be controversy about the sprinklers, and we either need to have a well-publicized hearing or postpone it until it's more convenient to have a well-publicized forum on it.
Okay. Eli?
Yeah, I think I agree with Ann. I think it'll be easier to have a well-publicized forum ahead of a June meeting, and a more we can socialize a little bit more. And then hopefully at the June meeting, it would be easy to move through. Whereas I suspect that, right, if we try to do it in April, we'll end up with less well socialized proposal.
Okay, and I would add my own comment that I agree with the emerging consensus of the board that we move that to a special town meeting. Since we're not voting on articles tonight, we're doing this by consensus. So that one we're going to move. Any other articles that people would like to remove from annual town meeting? Either to have them go away or to move them to special town meeting. Okay, Sarah, you had your hand up and I was not calling on you while I got the consensus of the board on the articles that we're looking at. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I was wanting to defer the fire issue
Okay,
because I think it hasn't been vetted, and I think with the 40B project and the fire chief has been so adamant that the sprinklers will restrict the need to have a second egress, that I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time.
Okay. All right, Greg, so does that give you the consensus of the board on these articles?
Yes, thank you. That's helpful.
I'm getting better at lip reading, so, okay. And I'm willing to do a background write-up on the select board article. Just from the information that I've collected about it in the past. Okay, then we're going to move to administrative matters. And Alan, don't go away, because the first administrative matter is setting a date for the special town meeting. The available dates that I've confirmed through the school are Saturday the 11th or the 18th in the afternoon, and Tuesday the 21st. Monday the 20th is a town holiday. So those are the dates that we could go with.
So the 21st would be evening.
21st would be evening. The 11th or the 18th would be a Saturday afternoon, and we had previously talked about a 1 p.m. start.
I don't know. You think you want to have that on the summer solstice? I'm just kidding.
You think there'll be a lot of people out there celebrating?
Dancing around pyres of some sort, perhaps, but
We've actually had it on the solstice in the evening for 2 years.
yeah.
There is the matter of trying to get to have the most participation from families who would otherwise be leaving on vacation once school closes. And it was brought to my attention that the 20th was a town holiday, that that people may be leaving town to take a 3-day weekend, although that would primarily be town employees, since I'm not sure that Juneteenth is a broadly accepted business holiday. And the dates and times for last day of school that we've previously discussed. I believe the last day of school is the 16th, pending snow days, of which at least one has happened. So the 17th would be the earliest that they would end school. It's going to be really tough to have families bring their kids in for school if it rolls over to the 22nd, excuse me, the 21st, because there will be no school on the 20th.
Jeff, do we still have our meeting on the 20th? Because that is a scheduled date, I think, for
No, our
selectmen's
meeting, if we did the 21st, would be the town meeting.
Right, but I'm saying that a regularly scheduled selectmen's meeting is normally the 20th, and if that is a holiday, does that push that to the 21st, and then that would be superseded by the special town meeting if
Are
we
you
schedule?
asking whether we're not going to have two selectmen meetings in the month of June?
No, I think in the month of June, they're scheduled for the 6th and the 20th. And you're saying that the 20th is a holiday.
The 20th is a holiday that we voted on.
Okay. So does that mean the selectmen meeting gets pushed off when it's on a Monday holiday to the following day, which is the 21st, which we're now talking about for the special town meeting?
Correct.
Okay,
So we would have to make other arrangements for our second meeting of the month.
that's my only point.
And
That's
the transfer, re-election of officers, re-election of chair, and
Yep.
all the other business that happens at that time.
Okay,
Are you planning on going out of town again?
no, not on that date.
Okay, Eli, you have your hand up. Eli?
Oops, I was going to lean towards the 11th or the 18th. I don't think I have a really strong opinion about which one or the other. The average temperatures around that time of year don't shift very much between the two dates. They tend to have slightly higher lows. If I were to, pick right now, I'd say the 11th.
We need to pick I don't know whether we want to pick a potential rain date. Would you just work it into the next day, Alan, if it were outdoors and if it were raining?
I would skip 2 days. The records that I've looked at say that we've never had 3 consecutive days of rain in June, but we have had 2 consecutive days of rain in June. So if you want to pick a date, I would skip another date and go.
To the 14th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the 13th.
We can't go to the 13th. The school is tied up.
Okay.
Although if we're outdoors.
Well, you could go, we could shoot for the afternoon of the 11th, and
we could go for the 13th if we were outdoors, because it would be out on the football field.
yeah, and the daylight it's not quite the solstice, but it's still pretty long.
What time would that be then?
I think we've started the last outdoor meetings at 6 or 6:30. I would favor the earlier start because it's going to be a long meeting. If we have to be outdoors and
But the plan as it's emerging is to go with the 11th. Is there any objections to that plan?
11th in the afternoon.
Yes, at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Indoors at Memorial School,
If possible.
unless there is a continuation of the COVID emergency.
Right.
Only a mild objection on my part. I am coming back on a night flight, arriving in Boston at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning from the West Coast. I'm in Alaska for a week.
So
So
not
I
only
can't-
do we have to shovel your driveway, we have to meet you at the airport with coffee.
I haven't made arrangements for a ride yet, but we can talk. So I guess, yeah, I'm going to have a lot of coffee that day because it's going to be a very long day for me. But
You'll sleep
I'll
very
be up
well
to it.
that night.
I'll be up to it.
Who put you on the first 3 articles? Okay, so we need to do this as a vote. So can I get a motion for Saturday, June 11th, starting at 1 p.m.?
I move that we place the date for the special town meeting on Saturday, June 11th at 1 p.m.
Second. At Memorial School.
or not.
I don't want to put that into the motion because if we have to move to an outdoor meeting, it's not going to be at Memorial School.
Well, it was moved and seconded without it in there, so.
Okay. Further discussion? Eli,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes,
Ann,
Yes,
and the board, the chair votes yes.
Need to vote the rain date too. Yes, no?
Um, So it's a contingency motion. Contingent on the meeting being outside and the meeting being rained out.
Yeah.
So put it together, Eli.
I'll make a motion, should the special town meeting on June 11th be held outside and be rained out, then rain date for the special town meeting shall be Tuesday, June 14th at 6 p.m.
Is there a second?
second,
Okay, Alan, is the 14th acceptable or do you want the 13th?
No,
14th,
14th is fine.
okay.
It's Flag Day.
And Bastille Day.
Mm,
No, that's July 14th.
Moved it up. Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Becky,
yes,
Ann,
yes,
John,
Yes.
Eli,
Yes.
and the non-Francophile chair votes yes.
I was a history major, Jeff.
My wife would really give me a hard time if I didn't know that, being in July, since she is the Francophile in this house. Okay, we've got our special meeting for the commuter rail station TOD scheduled. There was a request for an update on concerns that were raised about 40B legal counsel. And I've spoken to Sarah about this, and she's fine with legal counsel staying as it is and would like it to continue to work with Attorney Pucci. Following a coordination meeting that happened with him shortly after these concerns were raised. There's been a high degree of communication and representation in the ZBA hearings. So that's the update on that. If there are any questions.
not on that, but I
Okay,
do have
not
a
on that,
question.
but
The but is on the administrative matters, item B, which was the MBTA public forum. Just can you remind?
Pardon me, Becky. Mr. Chairman, do you have any other need for me in this meeting?
we have all kinds of need for you, Alan, but you could leave tonight as long as you were on standby.
Okay, I'm on standby. Thank you and good evening.
Good night, Alan.
Good night.
Um,
I just, what date did we reschedule that for? Or did we?
March 22nd.
March, thank you.
Okay.
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 Thank you.
BOS policy review. Ann,
Yeah, we have 5 policies here. And may I share my screen?
I believe you can. Let's see. Yes. Wait a
okay.
minute. Wait a minute.
Oops.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I didn't wait a minute.
Sorry.
Okay, fine. Give me just a moment while I bring up. No, that's not the right one. Yes, that is right. Okay. The policy on erasing tapes we have discussed, and the new policy reflects the new state of communications. And would you like me to read the whole thing, or would you like me to highlight the?
Is there any board member that has a need to have this read or highlighted?
I do not, but are we going to have I mean, in terms of punctuation, et cetera, is that just going to be spell checked later?
If you have punctuation and things like that, this is a first reading, and we can send me an email and I'll fix whatever needs to be fixed for the second reading. For those who are listening, the major differences are that we keep video recordings for a year, which are available from the town hall, and that other boards are also required if they have judicial authority. And that approximately is that. I lost it for it. So, can we approve this for a first reading?
Can I get a clarification?
Yeah. Yes,
The
of course.
the orphan that's on the second page is part of the new policy.
It's part of the new policy, yes.
Okay. Okay, so like a motion to move this policy as written with editorial changes, punctuation, etc., to a second reading at our meeting on the 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
the chair votes yes.
The next policy is a policy on policies, which is policies will be which reflects what we are currently doing as did the original. The major changes are that we no longer have an executive secretary, we have a town administrator, and that policies should be kept in an electronic form. And be available. So the differences are in the red line. Essentially, a policy can be proposed by anyone, employee, town official of any sort, and the public. The proposal is to the town administrator, who seeks advice of town council, that we have 2 readings. And there's an appendix, which is a schedule. This is a second reading of this policy.
Okay, Ann, could I ask if you could raise the ribbon menu? I believe you can do that on the right-hand side with a little up arrow. No, not that one.
Yeah.
Down in the corner of the ribbon menu, the right-hand.
There,
bottom
okay,
corner.
got it. Sorry, thank you.
Beautiful, that helps.
Yes. And I could,
Go ahead. Oh, actually, that's fine if, when you're presenting these, the sections of text that have been taken out are so that it stays side by side, but it's pretty clear. Okay, this is our second reading of this policy. We would need a motion to adopt this policy tonight.
Before we do, Jeff, if I may.
You may.
Comes to point, if in fact at the ATM, annual town meeting, Board of Selectmen is changed to Select Board. How does that impact?
then I think someone will have to go through all of these and change Board of Selectmen to Select Board. But since at the moment we have a Board of Selectmen,
Okay.
it seems better to approve them like this.
May I address that?
We could do that as a single motion, couldn't we?
May I please address that for a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
The issue of the Select Board versus Board of Selectmen was actually considered a few years ago. And at the time it was considered, I believe that there was some state precedence or some legal method by which motions involving these changes could be made so that existing documents did not need to have their contents changed. And this is because general bylaws typically held the word Board of Selectmen, and many other documents held Board of Selectmen, and requiring that they all change was impractical. So the state recognizes ways of changing them by reference. So yes, you could go through and redo these, but you do not need to.
Does that answer your question, Becky?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay,
Motion to approve. Second reading of the policy on policies.
Second.
okay. We've talked about this a lot, so unless there's further discussion, I'll go to a roll call vote. Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
and Mr. Bodmer Turner votes yes.
Okay. One of the items in the policy on policies is that the board may grant temporary approval of a policy or policy revision in lieu of formal action to meet emergency conditions or special events. And I suggest that we consider this next policy, which is the use of town council, in that category. And my reasons for suggesting that is that we can certainly approve this for a first reading, but I think we also should approve it as an emergency measure, because the policy that is currently in effect is unworkable and will cause significant difficulties for boards in town if we do not adopt this as quickly as possible. This policy is substantially rewritten to say that the town administrator must approve contact with town council rather than the Board of Selectmen, as is currently the policy. And that the town administrator will send contracts and so on to town council for signed approval as to form. And the town council shall provide a report on pending litigation twice a year. And the town administrator will review each bill and report to the Board of Selectmen any unusually high legal expense. So essentially, this policy, as I'm suggesting it, takes the Board of Selectmen out of the day-to-day control of contact with town council.
I'll make a recommendation on the procedures.
Mhm.
It says town council shall provide a report on all pending litigation. Can we make that a little bit more explicit? Town council shall provide a report to the Board of Selectmen on all litigation.
So the recent practice has been once a year. I don't know if you feel the need for 2 times.
No.
And add the word on all before all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Question, I got a couple of questions. One, in regard to that comment there, the line that Eli was just addressing, there could be litigation that happens and is no longer pending within that time frame. So do we want to say pending, or should we change that some way to cover all legal activity in that window?
Fine.
Yeah, you can get rid of pending. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then up at the top where, I guess, what is it, procedure, policy? Must approve all contact with town council. Should we say, given the conversation with the planning board, et cetera, should we say approve / pre-approve? Because it's possible that some contact may occur before you have a chance to approve that, Greg. Although the expectation is that you would, but I'm just wondering if from a practical perspective, that makes sense.
Contacts. Damn.
Okay, that would cover it.
And would you go on policy of policies, just show me on the emergence of the in lieu that the BOS can do. I just want to be clear on that for the application.
Right.
here.
This is the paragraph.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it talks about special events that will take place before formal action can be taken. Either one fits.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Um,
Go ahead.
Should it be part of this policy about so if there are, is the town administrator responsible for reporting to us at every meeting the contacts that have happened with town council?
My intention in writing it was that the selectmen would, the town council, town administrator
Yeah,
would let us know when there was a new contact, when a new subject was brought to the town council for their assistance, and give some idea of what the scope was going to be. And then if there were changes in scope, would report then. So it was event driven.
I'm concerned about confidentiality. There are certain matters that both Greg as town administrator and perhaps this board or Alan may be talking to town council about. That if they're brought before, that may involve litigation. That if they're brought before us, because he's told that under this policy, he has to let us know about new contacts and what they're about.
And he's free to bring those forward in an executive session.
Is that workable for you, Greg?
Well, I guess I would prefer to see it on a monthly basis or some sort of periodic basis rather than every single time. I'm just trying to think of an example. I wanted to just double check on the hearing requirements for a liquor license. I forgot, does the change of manager require that, or can we do that on our own? That's a minutia that I don't know. I need to take up your time in a meeting to talk about.
Okay.
I mean, there are some de minimis double checkings that we do on occasion, just to make sure we're doing something correctly.
Okay. Sorry, my thought I was thinking more of requests from boards for contact rather than internal. I don't like words like significant, and I'm not sure that saying that it should be a monthly report, because there may easily be months when nothing of interest happens. Does
That's-
anyone have a?
We do get a monthly bill, and I can certainly share that with you. And if you have a question, I'm happy to answer.
I'm hoping not to have to review the monthly bills.
Yeah. Well, it just lists the activity. I mean, they itemize. So
Okay,
you can see every every 15-minute increment is how.
okay,
And the topic, they list it. It just
okay.
it's very easy for me to just pass that along to you. That's that becomes an easy report.
Monthly. Oh. Does that work?
Could it be monthly if there are changes?
I think it can stay simple, right? I mean, it's just like this, and if it's okay to just hand the monthly bill out, then that's sufficient. I mean, the whole point is just to allow the Board of Selectmen by policy to have visibility into this topic.
I don't know that I would take out new contacts in. I don't know if I'd take out the word new.
I took it out because I thought it would be simpler for Greg to supply us with a bill rather than a report that requires that he identify new items, but I'll put it back in.
Okay, no, you don't need to.
Well, in that instance, you can end at the first contacts. You don't need to say in changes of scope of existing contacts, because that's going to be there.
Maybe so that we have some warning that there is a change coming.
Well, that wouldn't be on the bill. The bill is a story of what has happened, right?
Right. So that's the advantage of that. That gives you a heads up if there's
Okay.
something big that's breaking.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable
Okay.
to call out significant changes.
I'm not sure you want the word existing there. There may be a new contact. So
Yep.
Town council usually reports to us on litigation in the beginning of July, correct?
it's been August, September, the last few years, but
Part of the point, I think, of having it in the June, July timeframe is that when newly elected board members come on, it's sort of part of their onboarding process. So they don't end
Yeah.
up waiting
That's a good point. Yeah.
to get.
So should we put in the month of July?
Well, tying it down too tightly is I think
At the
you never
beginning of
know
the
what's
fiscal
going
year.
to happen. I would even pin it to between June and August. Or simply say in the month of June or July.
That kind of read that the litigation that's being
Right.
presented
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
from June or July.
Right.
It should actually go as the head to the sentence.
Oh, well. Is it on all litigation within a specific time frame? I mean, is that what we're asking for? I just think it should be clear.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'd say, on all litigation pending or settled within the past year.
Calendar year or fiscal?
No, the past year, up to the point she makes the report.
Okay.
Should that be a paragraph? That the next sentence? Okay, any further comments on this? Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Yes. So as chair of CBA, I think it's important for us to have direct access to town council to avoid future litigation.
Are you suggesting that that should be without consulting with the town administrator?
Correct. So we have many issues presented to us and we can go through the town administrator, but I'm not sure that's necessary.
Well,
Things are challenging.
The issue is, Sarah, that the Board of Selectmen is, has the responsibility for any legal issues that the town may incur. Greg is the administrator that reports to the Board of Selectmen. I don't think that, I have a concern about boards and committees having direct access without touching base with Greg and getting his nod on going ahead.
So you're changing policy because we've been able to go direct.
Well,
We're changing procedure. The policy is much, much more restrictive, the existing
That's-
policy.
the
That's
existing
fine.
policy is that you have not, that you're outside that policy if you've been going direct. The existing policy is that you have to fill out a form and it has to go before a meeting of the Board of Selectmen for our vote.
That's fine, and you want to pursue that, you're incurring additional legal liability.
You're not hearing me. That if you've been going direct, you're outside the existing policy. We're modifying the existing policy so that the Board of Selectmen's vote is not necessary. And that Greg can, that you approach Greg and that Greg can make a determination about whether to go directly, that you go directly to town
Do
council.
what you want, but you're jeopardizing losing all the boards of, or the chairs of the boards. You're making too many hoops to jump through.
Sarah, the hoops are there. You haven't been observing the hoops.
That's
And we're
okay.
trying to change it and make it more streamlined. The hoops are there. For you to go directly to town council is outside of the policies of the Board of Selectmen, which has responsibility for all litigation in the town.
That's fine, but you can do what you want, but we're up against timeframes, and if we need to go.
And how is contacting Greg going to change that?
When we're up against timeframe, and we need to use town council, it could be challenging. Greg can speak to that.
Greg?
Well, I'm not aware of where it's been a problem. But again, we haven't followed the written policy, but the practice, Sarah picks up the phone or sends me an email and says, I need to contact council on XYZ because of our hearing last night. And 9 times out of 10, I respond, say proceed. It's a simple email response.
Yeah, I don't see how that's a particularly onerous thing, and I can think of a number of times when having that simple awareness and filter is pretty important. I would not like to get rid of that filter. It's not a big hoop to jump through.
Greg, is that turnaround time like most instances 24 hours?
Yeah, unless I was at a conference or on vacation, that's the only time that it might.
Okay, because you had
Might
mentioned
slip.
before that it might take like a week, but then you were going to council and saying, is this something we should be talking to you about? But that's not the circumstances here. This is just, I need to talk, I need some legal advice here. And just for your awareness, and you're okay.
Right. Sometimes it takes council a few days to respond, but typically they're pretty good.
And all we're talking about is the approval, not the write-up and the forwarding of the issue. It's just, can I go talk to town council about X? That could be done in an hour or less.
Right.
She's not looking to you to go to council to talk to them. She just wants a yay nay from you directly without putting the council in the middle of that.
Right.
Okay, I agree with
Ron?
Eli. That's quite reasonable.
Ron?
Yes, appreciate this change in policy. If Greg's not around, could we go through our town planner?
Uh,
Can I comment on that?
You can comment on it, Eli. I also have a comment. Go
So
ahead.
typically, when Greg is not around, the responsibilities that are assigned to him are typically reassigned to the chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, understood. And this policy, is this taking effect immediately, or is there a waiting period, or if you approve it?
Well, we were just discussing that, Ron, that typically our policies on developing policies is that this would be the first reading. We do the second reading on the 21st. However, we're aware that both the planning board and the ZBA may have a need to be in touch with town council on matters other than the 40B, since there's an ongoing relationship between the ZBA and town council for the 40B. So we are considering, and I assume that you would like us to consider, using a different part of our policy on policies to allow both those two boards to have access to town council through Greg under this new policy immediately.
Thank you for, yes, for considering that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the policy? Sarah?
If you have too many hoops, you won't have any volunteers. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
It's a challenge.
Sarah, if the ZBA was reeled in on their current practice, there would be even more hoops.
Well, do what you want. But
Well,
if you
we don't want to do that, but we want to know, we need to have some kind of control over legal services in the town. And we're not just reaching out to get control. It's the Board of Selectmen's responsibility under the bylaws to deal with all legal matters and litigation in the town.
But for a couple of years, I did not feel like I had the opportunity to deal with town council, and we had appeals. And we need to have the access to town council
What, you're
to
not,
hold appeals.
Sarah, you're not, I'm not sure what the breakdown here is, but you're not being told you won't have access to town council.
But for a number of years, we did not have access. That's all I'm saying.
And if that's an issue, I would hope that you would bring that issue directly to the Board of Selectmen after discussing it with the town administrator.
Right.
First, I would bring it to the town administrator to see what the problem is. And then secondly, if you feel like you're going to incur significant legal costs because of some block from the town administrator, then your next step would be to go to the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
We don't want to see the town exposed to substantial liability because of procedures. But we also need to keep, and wearing your other hat, the expenditures of the town processed in a way that we know what's going on.
And I just think chairs of the boards need to understand their ability to access legal services.
Does what board?
Every board.
Obviously not. Because planning board was going through the procedure that exists and filling out a form and sending it to the Board of Selectmen, and it really dragged out. And you're saying that the ZBA has been going directly to town council.
Yes.
So, you know, all we're doing is trying to streamline that.
But
And
that was after 4 years,
after 4 years of what?
not having access to town council.
And you brought that to the Board of Selectmen.
No, we finally figured it out.
Well, I don't know what that means, but I wouldn't put up with it for 4 years if there were a different town administrator who was blocking ZBA's access to timely access to town council. I would bring it directly to the Board of Selectmen because that's where the responsibility lies.
Thank you.
And what we're saying is that we want Greg to do this because it's less cumbersome than coming to us all the time.
Makes sense.
And Greg has a handle on where we're going with different kinds of things. He also has the experience of having things that have been reviewed by town council when a new chair comes into a board, and being able to say, well, we've reviewed that previously with town council, and this is what town council said. And sometimes that can alleviate the whole need to consult with legal counsel.
Also, if you don't mind my saying, the other reason I would like Greg to be tightly in the loop in all of this is if things go sideways on any one of these issues, and sometimes they do, it's going to land in his lap almost always. One way or another, he's going to get tangled up in it. And I think it is reasonable and important for him to be able to perceive the possibility of that coming along.
In that regard, in the old policy, it says, once granted permission, copies of all correspondence with town council shall be sent to the Board of Selectmen. Are we covered? I don't want to be reviewing all copies of correspondence with town council as a board.
Oh, good.
We're covered by that monthly report of contacts.
That's a report of contacts, though. It's not the substance of the contacts.
Right, but if there was a topic that you wanted to know more about, that would flag it for you, and you could say, give me more details on X.
Okay.
In light of this discussion, I am considering moving the philosophy section, the 2 paragraphs at the beginning, from the old policy to the new policy, just to make it clear where the responsibilities are.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's wise.
Could I suggest that we don't use the word philosophy and just have that start right under use of town council?
Okay.
Is that okay with the other members of the board?
Sure. Or you could change it to motivation, but I'm fine with either one.
Yes.
Okay. So we have two matters that we need to deal with to finish this up
Mhm.
tonight. One is whether we pass this policy on with the changes that we've made to it. And all the work that Ann and Eli and Greg did to it before it came to us, to a second reading. The second is whether we grant, under the special circumstances, portion of our policy on policies, both the planning board and the ZBA with immediate access to this policy as written.
Can we do that as two motions?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I'll make a motion that we move the policy on use of town council as modified here tonight to a second reading.
Second,
Okay. Roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes,
Becky,
yes.
Eli,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes. Now I need a motion to give ZBA and the planning board access to the new policy as written tonight. Effective immediately.
can I change the motion a little bit?
You can change it, sure.
I will make a motion that the board grant temporary approval of the first reading of the use of town council. Effective tonight.
And ending when?
To be updated by the result of the second reading and
Okay, can I make it simpler, Eli, if you'll take a friendly amendment to that?
sure.
Effective immediately and ending with the adoption of the policy after a second reading.
Fine.
For the planning board and the ZBA,
Yes,
I would second that.
okay. Any discussion of that motion? Are we clear on what the motion is? It's temporary approval for the planning board and the ZBA to have access to this policy, to operate under this policy until such time as the second reading is done and the policy is adopted. Okay, roll call vote. Eli,
Yes.
Becky,
Whoops, yes.
Ann,
yes,
John,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Okay, so I think we need to get an email to both Ron and Sarah as chairs of those two committees with a copy of the policy as it's written now and the substance of the motion that was just passed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Sarah. I understand your concerns. I just want to make sure that we got this clear.
This is great. Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes, ma'am.
just, if it's okay, at the end of the meeting, I will send you the text of the policy. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to reproduce the motion exactly, but perhaps you can. And that the notification go from you to the heads of the ZBA and planning board.
That's fine. I'll do that tonight, Ann.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to less exciting things.
Less exciting.
Got me on the edge of my seat.
Um, the changes to the meetings of the Board of Selectmen. I can't resist making stuff active voice, so a significant number of the changes are just that. My understanding is that the policy has been followed, and that there is, so there have been no significant changes, with the possible exception of the prepare agendas item, which obviously town administrator, and the practice that we've been following of allowing other members of the board to propose items for the agenda, but that the chair and the administrator determine the content, final content of the agenda. Otherwise, not changed anything except town administrator.
It's actually interesting, the reorganization policy is slightly different than what we've done in the past. But I think it's actually okay, because what we've done in the past is the current chair is always open the meeting, then you do the reorganization. But the flaw with that is that, the current chair might get voted out and not be there. So I think the member with the longest service, that's all right. I don't have any substantive changes to this.
Does this organization doesn't refer to or make reference to a vice chair?
That's true. And neither did the original, but then there were only 3 members. So probably having a chair and a vice chair was okay.
It was a little bit isolating for the person who was not the chair or the vice chair.
It is.
So so could we just add at the end of the sentence that says the first item on the agenda will be the election of a member to chair the meetings and a vice chair to chair the meetings in the absence of the elected chair?
Okay.
Or we can separate this out and put in a set of duties for the vice chair.
No, I think the duties of the vice chair are the same as the duties of the chair.
Okay.
In absence of the chair, right?
Well, it's not just
Although-
absence. There've been times when the chairs recuse themselves and given the running of the meeting over to the vice chair.
Yeah, I think we might, the authority of the chair of the Board of Selectmen actually, I think is wrapped up in state law.
It is.
And I'm not sure that the state law talks about the case if you have a vice chair. So that might actually require a little bit of feedback from town council.
Okay.
I mean, certainly a vice chair could run meetings, but I had said that the duties would be the same, but I don't think that my statement was necessarily correct.
Okay. Can I spell? No. When?
Can you add after absent or delegates? That's good.
Okay. I didn't want to say them. I didn't want to say him. I didn't want to say her.
No, delegates that authority, period. That's fine. Now, why is there a jump after,
Oh, probably somebody put in a tab or something stupid.
oh, silly tab?
Spaces versus tabs. Here we go.
Um,
All right, that's a formatting
let me-
problem, but-
let me fight with Word another night.
Yep, go ahead. Can you roll down?
Sure.
I do a paragraph on the chair of the Board of Selectmen, shall.
Okay.
I think you probably ought to handle the duties of the chair rather than say preside at the meeting, because that absence could result in the vice chair having to handle any of those bullets that you list below.
Yeah,
that
and
time.
that's where I said we need town council to weigh in.
Right.
Anything on the next page, Ann? I would put a period after agenda, take out but, and start a new sentence so that
Ah, okay.
Any further comments on this policy?
Yeah, the only thing I'll point out is in some cases, these policies reflect or restate things that are actually a matter of state law. So this is an example of one of them. When you talk about the duties of the chair, a bunch of those duties are articulated in different way with different level of absoluteness within open meeting law. I'm just noting it. I don't think it's relatively important. We're not differing or particularly in conflict with it. I just wouldn't want people reading this to get the impression that it's only policy that sets these duties and authorities.
So could we go back to the top of the chair, duties of the chair? Eli, would it be useful to put in under duties of the chair that the chair of the Board of Selectmen has specific duties outlined in state law, comma, open meeting law, comma, and
Roberts?
This specifically ignores Roberts, but
no, not Roberts. No, just and open meeting law, because I think that those two references would be helpful.
Mhm.
I don't know whether all of the
I think just that statement would be sufficient. I think that statement gives somebody sufficient notice that they should look beyond this document for the responsibilities and authorities of the chair.
state law.
Yeah.
The open meeting.
laws.
and the open meeting law.
Yeah.
And I would put in Massachusetts.
Sure. Have to spell it.
Massachusetts state law, right? Mass state, just Mass.
Commonwealth.
Yeah, I think that's good enough. That just gives fair notice.
How about under this policy?
Yeah, under this policy and in accordance with those laws. Now I'm happy.
So then,
Well-
Eli, do you want to pull out as imposed by law?
No.
Why are these double underlines in there?
Because Microsoft Word thinks that the semicolons are dumb and would like them to be periods.
Oh, okay. This is dear leader Gates.
And don't you have a neighbor you could talk to about that?
I think he has moved on to better things.
I think so.
You can
too.
right click on those and say ignore, but they'll come back the next time you open the document.
At some point, I will turn off Word's ability to comment on style. But I find I write better when it's yelling at me.
Sure. Okay, anything else that we need to do on this so that we can move this to a second reading? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for,
This one, I think, is for a first reading.
Oh, this is to be moved for a first reading? This is not the first reading?
this is the
This is the-
first reading.
All right, I'll make a motion that we move the policy on meetings of the Board of Selectmen to a second reading.
Second.
As amended.
As amended.
amended. Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling,
Yes,
and Mr. Bodmer Turner votes yes.
okay. And our last challenge for tonight in this area is the use of town hall.
Okay, in the first paragraph,
Yeah,
should we be saying there will be no charge for the use of town hall and Seaside One?
okay. Yes,
I mean, is that the case?
Yeah.
Greg?
Yeah, yes, that is the case.
Okay.
I will probably change the chairman in the next sentence to the town administrator.
yeah,
And that would also have to go previously. Other groups, the sentence that starts with other groups. I mean, it's the chairman of the Board of
Yeah.
Selectmen,
Right,
the
fine.
one who's approving these, or is this delegated to Greg?
I wouldn't want to have to do that.
Neither would I.
Okay, so it's Greg's fault.
Yes.
Okay,
Just one more straw.
oh, we're
Um,
trying.
The building should probably be an S, last word on that
Yes, of course,
paragraph.
thank you.
Because we've added the second one.
Yep,
Okay.
What happens if we ever get another office or another?
let's back up.
There you go. facilities.
Yeah, but could it be, I mean, then you've got the Chowder House and, right, things like that, that are town facilities
Are,
that do charge.
Right.
no, just leave it town hall, Seaside One, and somebody else can modify this policy if we ever add a building.
Mhm.
Holding cells at the police department?
Let's see, let's put in a space here.
First line in the paragraph, get rid of the or at the end.
Yes, wait, Ah,
Just about there.
right,
Yeah.
yes, got it.
Do we want to change the first sentence in the second paragraph, third paragraph now? The Board of Selectmen to the town administrator? Or the town administrator acting on behalf of the Board of Selectmen? Or do we want to just leave it as Board of Selectmen because it's a Board of Selectmen policy?
Or do you want to put it town administrator, and then back in the beginning where it's for the purpose of this policy, the town administrator shall administer on behalf of the Board of Selectmen?
No, because we got the town clerk involved in this too.
Mhm.
There's a lot of,
It's like a town here.
Okay. Why not the town clerk?
Except that the authority for approval for those kinds of uses,
Other groups.
that's all other groups. That's the town administrator's authority.
Sure. I have a comment in the all cases paragraph. Scroll down.
Okay.
Yeah, you see it, what I'm aiming at?
clerk?
Say that again.
So the front foyer, we used to post all public notices of all meetings, et cetera, in the front foyer, but we shifted that officially to the town website.
Mhm.
And this should be consistent with that.
Yep. Website.
Okay.
Should there be another priority for boards that require access to hybrid, whatever?
Well, wouldn't that be in public hearings?
Some of it's public hearings, some of it's meetings. And a meeting of a board that requires access to requires remote access.
I think we need a separate policy on remote access.
Okay.
I
Oh, boy.
I understand where you're going with that, but I think we need a separate policy on remote access.
Okay. Writing something new. Oh, boy. What
Oh,
fun.
boy, thrilling.
Any other comments?
Mm-mm.
Looking for a motion?
Yep.
I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we move the policy on the use of town hall to a second reading as amended tonight.
Second,
Roll call vote. Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bob Turner votes yes. Okay, that's our update on board policies. We are now running at 10:09. We have a consent agenda to change the manager at the Manchester Bath and Tennis Club, to approve a common victualler's license for Alley's Beach Street Cafe, and the approval of our minutes from February 22nd. Anything out of the consent agenda that someone would like to remove?
Yes.
What?
The change of manager. There are a few items in there that I just wanted to go over.
Sure. Other than that, are we good on the license for Alleys and the approval of minutes? Okay, I get a motion to accept the consent agenda with the exception of the change of manager for Manchester Bath and Tennis.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Eli,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
John, you still awake?
Yep, still here.
And Becky,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. What's your comment on the license for Bath and Tennis?
And I see Kimberly Bird is on, so I just, under the application, item 2, Kimberly Bird, 3A manager information, it's Kimberly BIRFD, and it should be consistent throughout, but the item that really stuck out was under 3B, where it says, have you ever been convicted of a state, federal, or military crime? And it was ticked yes. So it said yes, but nothing else was attached, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Kimberly, are you still there?
I am still here. That must have been a complete mischeck by Ms. Sharon George, who was doing the application on her computer with me by her side. I've never been convicted of any crime, military or otherwise.
I didn't think so, but I
Okay.
don't think we can.
I was a little
approve-
in shock there. I'm sorry, it's late. So I was like, wait, what's going on?
It's
What?
very late, so
Yeah.
What are they gonna do to me? I just want to work.
I know. So I would say that the name under 3A needs to be corrected where it says proposed manager, and someone needs to uncheck the yes box. And
Definitely, yes.
check the no.
Is that something, I'm sorry, I'm not unfamiliar with the process, because I was in Hamilton previously. So I'm not always familiar with Manchester. Is there a way, should I just come down to town hall? I mean, do we,
If you come down to town hall, you can do that.
Okay. because I had been working with Sharon, and I know that she is new this year, so she was a little hesitant to, of the process as well.
Sure.
So apparently we missed a couple things on that, typos. I do have a query check in from the Manchester Police as well, because that was required. I asked him if he wanted the one from my previous year, and he just said do a new one. I said that's fine. So I know that one is going to be coming across to the town shortly as well, in case there's any other issue.
That was it.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. That was horrifying.
No, I rather.
I think that
guess
was just
that was not the case.
A misclick. Yes, it is not the case at all.
Yes.
Is, Kimberly, is the B&T a corporation or an LLC? Do you know?
I don't believe it is in as a corporation. I mean, it is member owned. I'm looking at some of the, I apologize, I just came on less than 60 days ago. So all of my things here, I'm looking at my licenses for.
Yeah, I'm trying to look to, it just says incorporated. I don't see anything that says LLC on my paperwork.
I don't believe it is an LLC, but I can double check with my board of governors on that.
So I would turn to Greg. Does this require the corporation clerk's signature, Greg?
I believe it does, yes.
Okay. So that would need to be done as well.
If I could
If
just
it's
get
an
a
LLC, if it's an LLC, then Lindsay can sign it.
Okay.
As the only signatory. But if it's a corporation, we need the corporation clerk's signature. And it may be Lindsay.
And who I can ask her tomorrow morning. I believe she's probably in bed by now.
Okay, so if you can get a
Because
clean
I'm looking
copy.
at my previous, because the whole reason for the change of manager was to renew our liquor license for this year.
Sure. And that's fine. And I think we can approve this with those changes because
Of
they're
course.
clerical changes.
Yes, I'm just looking at something. I'm sorry, it doesn't mention on any of my paperwork, LLC.
Okay, no problem. Sorry to hit you up with this at 10 minutes past 10.
No worries. I'm glad that I was still here because that would have been horrifying.
That would have been a delay.
That
So-
would definitely been a delay.
Is it acceptable to the board to go ahead and move this forward with a change to the 3B citizen background information and a change to the proposed manager's name in the first box and clarification of the corporate signature?
Yeah, nice catch, Becky.
Oh, well.
Yes, Ms. Jakes, thank you for that. That saved me a lot of hassle.
Okay.
Well,
So do I get a motion?
so moved.
Second,
Okay, roll call vote. Eli,
Yeah,
Becky,
Yes.
John,
yes.
Ann,
You're muted.
if she knows.
Yes,
Yes.
She's tired too, like the rest of us. And the chair votes yes. So you're good on this, Kimberly.
Okay.
Just please get back to the office and file the application correctly so that we can sign off on it.
I will be down. I'll be in town tomorrow, so I will stop by
Fabulous.
the office tomorrow. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you for staying. To town administrators report.
Yeah, okay, I'll be brief. You can read more details, but just wanted to highlight a couple of climate, climate action, climate resiliency efforts underway. One is called the Voices for Climate Change, for Climate Solutions, Climate Action, which is divided in two parts. One is conducting interviews of residents throughout Cape Ann. And we have a small team working on that in Manchester, and would love to expand that effort. We're looking to work with some students to help us do that expansion. If you or you know of others who would be interested, you have I sent to you the interviewer's packet that explains what's needed. So we're hopeful of getting some input, hearing people's cherished assets of the area and how they may be impacted. Excuse me. How they may be impacted with some of the expectations of climate change and the impacts, and how we might want to avoid some of our cherished places, protect them. There's also part of the Voices Project is ethnography study that a team from some Harvard researchers are doing for us. And they are living in Cape Ann for the next 3 months. And again, collecting perspectives and understanding what people value and cherish in the area as part of this whole effort. In addition, excuse me, there is an effort underway to study various solutions as to how we can mitigate some of the expected impacts. It starts off with a simulation of a Category 3 hurricane and graphically showing us what happens to various areas under such a storm, and then saying, okay, this is what would happen if we don't do anything. Here are some measures we can take to protect some of our more critical assets. And example from other areas of the United States and also throughout the world that people have been implementing that we may want to consider implementing here. So there'll be presentations on these in the coming months, and websites that people can access, and we'll be getting that information out as it is developed. So some good information for us to digest and to help us think about some of the future steps, future actions that we will need to be taking. Second item is the owner of 34 Tappan Street has expressed interest in the possibility of creating a senior center on that site. Obviously, a lot of work to be done to see if that is feasible and something that is desired. But it is of interest. Nancy and I were able to have a walkthrough of the building. It appears to be in very solid shape, built with very large timbers, as it was originally built as a granary, and held a lot of heavy grain. So the building appears to be in very strong condition, and is a post and beam construction, so it's easy to modify the interior. So the basic question is, from your perspective, is it worth pursuing to see if it has merit? And so we continue to collect information and to explore it as a possibility. The other possibilities that we have been exploring, we continue to hold a right of first refusal on the Cornerstone Church, but it is dependent on them successfully fundraising and building a new church up at the top of School Street near the 128 interchange. And we have been waiting. We've been having discussions with the Masons, but have not heard back from them. I think they are struggling to come up with a final resolution of how they want to move forward. So it seems from our perspective, from Nancy and my perspective, that it is worth advancing this possibility to see if it has legs and is something that might work.
It's great.
Any thoughts on this?
I think it'd be great if the town could acquire that property.
Mhm.
I'm perfectly willing to consider the alternative of their leasing it, but there are maybe other uses for it in the future that would be easier if we could acquire it rather than subletting.
Mhm. Agreed.
I think it's a reasonable spot for a senior center. I think we ought to push things along there. It doesn't, not much else, I guess, is happening with the other alternatives right now, Greg. It's pretty quiet. Yep.
I believe in some ways, John, this might push at least
Yes.
one of those alternatives to move forward a little bit
Yes,
faster.
if they know there's competition, you're correct.
Yes, but there's I don't know, there's huge issues in terms of the neighborhood. They came down real hard on having a multi-unit complex built there, housing unit complex built there. And it also raises questions about the whole MBTA siting, but I think we should pursue it and keep in mind the other things that are pressing on that property, as well as the other properties we're looking at. So I think we should pursue it. I don't think we should leave any stone unturned to get this senior center moved forward.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. We voted on the license for alleys tonight. Eli had brought up in one of our previous meetings that one of the owners of alleys has been hospitalized as a result of a stroke, and he's not doing well. Just to let you know that that's an ongoing struggle for that family. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call vote. John Rowan,
yes.
Ann Harrison,
Yes.
Becky Jakes,
Yes.
Eli Bowling,
Yes.
Jeffrey Biden Materna says yes. Good night, all.
Good night,
Jack,
everybody.
you can
Good
see
night.
why
Night.
we moved the agenda forward. Greg, can you stay on for just a second?
Sure.
And Becky, can you stay on for just a second?
Yes.
Okay.
Penny and Jack? No? Penny? Great. I'm just gonna, this is only a small scheduling thing, Greg. We're supposed to meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And out of due respect for you and your elders, do you have room in your schedule to move that meeting back a little bit in the morning?
I believe so.
Becky and I are really hoping that you do.
Yeah, I can make it work. Let me just double check here. Yes. So the only thing I have scheduled besides this was a 2 o'clock.
Okay. Becky, what's good for you?
I'm open except for I do have a 3 o'clock here at my house.
All right. 10:30, 11?
I can do whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. Either one. Yeah, either one is fine.
Okay. And on the issue of comp time, Mr. Town Administrator, go ahead.
Indeed.
A hell of a reentry.
Yes.
All right, so we're looking at what time now?
11 o'clock,
All righty.
unless you want 10:30, Becky. Okay.
No,
All
no.
right, 11 o'clock.
Okay, I'm
That's-
sending the
Alright.
changes. There you go.
Okay.
We'll see you then, Greg.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Good
Take
night,
care. Thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
Thank you for a great meeting.
All right.
A lot done, but
Right.
it's too long.
Yeah, good progress though. Good progress.
Welcome back.
All right. Indeed. All
See you
right,
later.
see you tomorrow.
Good night.